we're going to talk about the offseason and probably the biggest ticket item that will be available this offseason. The best defensive player for some in the NFL, but I think he's at least in the conversation. Myles Garrett has asked for a trade from the Cleveland Browns, and it does appear that he will be traded this offseason. So we're going to talk about the landing spots for Myles Garrett. 5 landing spots for Myles Garrett. Let's start it off by saying Myles Garrett has a manageable contract, and many of these teams can fit him inside their cap space. I wouldn't really be worried about that, okay? 19.7 cap hit in 2025. I think it's only like a 1 point something base salary with something attached to it, but I'm not sure how the trade will go down. It is probably certain that he is going to attract multiple high picks. I'm not exactly sure what a package would look like for Myles Garrett. We're probably going to learn that closer to when a trade would happen, which is probably going to be closer to draft day, right? I would expect, especially in a draft class where a lot of people are kind of unknown about how good the draft class is, especially the depth of the first round. So that's going to make the first round and these trades pretty interesting. And I think a lot of teams will be interested. I honestly had way too many teams on this list. I think a lot of teams are going to be interested in Myles Garrett. So let's start it off with our 5th team that I believe will be interested in Myles Garrett and could land Myles Garrett. That is the Green Bay Packers. Okay. The Green Bay Packers, I believe, need a defensive difference maker, a defensive disruptor, somebody that can not only get home to the quarterback, where the Packers really struggled with their pass rush this season. Rashawn Gary's really good player, but I feel like in terms of his pass rushing prowess, he's kind of dipped in recent years from the injuries. And Lucas Van Ness has never really been known, their first round pick from 2 years ago, I believe, never really been known for his pass rushing ability. He's more of a run defender, I would say, is his strength. And Preston Smith, they got rid of, so they could definitely use some pass rushing and just a dominant force up front. And they've been trying to draft these guys, but in their new defense, in that defense that they ran this year, that's very 49er-esque. This is a defense that involves a lot of 4-man rush. There's not going to be a lot of blitzing in Green Bay. There isn't very often. It's a game plan thing for them that occasionally they'll throw out there, but they want to be able to dictate the line of scrimmage. They want to be able to win with 4. They want to be able to get pressure with 4. And I can't imagine a greater way for Green Bay to go from a good team to a great team by adding somebody like Myles Garrett. Like, I honestly feel like their offense is good enough with the pieces they have. Even if Jordan Love stays at the same level that he stayed at, their O-line has been good. Matt LaFleur is a great play caller. Josh Jacobs is a dominant running game. They had a great running game this year. They've got a plethora of weapons. Sure, could they use another receiver, especially with Christian Watson getting injured late in the season? Yes, they could use another receiver. But a Myles Garrett difference maker that could get to the quarterback on 3rd down, that could make a big play, a strip sack, that could help their run defense. It could do so much for them. It could make their coverage better. I just feel like, especially in this scheme, they need that 4-man rush to dominate, and it felt like it just wasn't there this year. And they ran their defense like it did dominate, and it didn't. So for me, Myles Garrett to the Packers would be my 5th landing spot. Now, my 4th landing spot would be inside the same division, inside the NFC North with the Detroit Lions. I think the Lions, they have, first of all, the cap space to get this done. The Lions need to make sure that just because they lost a bunch of coaches on their staff doesn't mean that they don't, go quiet into the sunset, right? Quiet into the night. They don't go away. And a big move that they could make is pairing up Myles Garrett with Aiden Hutchinson and just saying, let's go for it. Let's make this big move. I mean, you look at their team, right? They've got Jared Goff. They've got an O-line that is one of the best in football. Even if they lose like a Kevin Zeitler at guard, I wouldn't be too concerned about that, right? They've got a young stud tight end in Sam Laporta. They've got a in his prime wide receiver, Amon-Ra. They've got another receiver that's dynamic in Jamison Williams. They've got a lot of young guys. Jahmyr Gibbs is young in his prime, just entering his prime. The defense, like Hutchinson is in his prime. They signed DJ Reader, Alim McNeil. Those guys are in the inside. Their run defense has always been solid. Their corners have had some issues, but a lot of that came down to injuries late in the season. They've got a young linebacker in Jack Campbell. They've got a young safety in Brian Branch. You go through the entire roster, it's like they got a lot of these guys signed. They got a lot of these guys that right now are ready to win right now. Like this is their time. So like they have enough cap space. Maybe you downgrade at a position. Like maybe you're not able to retain Carlton Davis or whatever this offseason. Maybe you're not able to retain Kevin Zeitler, but you're going to bring in Myles Garrett and have Aiden Hutchinson on the other side and just utterly dominate opposing offensive lines. And the entire thing about the Lions has been, let's bite kneecaps. Let's win the line of scrimmage. Let's be the tougher, more physical team. And if the Lions are bringing in Myles Garrett, they're going to win in the run game consistently on defense. They're going to dominate teams rushing 4. That's going to allow them to do some different things with their coverage, even with a weaker secondary. And we'll see how that defense evolves post Aaron Glenn, because they were very aggressive. They were blitz oriented. They were man coverage oriented. But that could change given how that kind of failed against the Commanders. That could evolve. And the way to evolve that is by bringing in one of the best pass rushers in the NFL and pairing him up with one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Because the Lions really haven't had that other partner in crime for Aiden Hutchinson these last couple of years. They tried it with Marcus Davenport, but it didn't work out. So I think the Lions, could make that huge splash that ultimately is the move that they try to make that puts them over the top. And I think they're ready to do that. The third team that I think could land Myles Garrett is the Washington Commanders. The Commanders is going to be a popular choice for many free agents, and I think popular in terms of rumors for many free agents because of the buzz that Jaden Daniels kind of brought to Washington this season. And the Commanders are going to be a super exciting, hyped up team entering 2025. But in order for them to fulfill their potential and fulfill that hype, they're going to have to improve, because when you look at Washington, it was clear watching them against Philadelphia, they probably weren't a great NFC championship type of team. They probably lucked into playing a heavily beat up Lions team. The Bucs game could have went either way. They won like 6 games by the skin of their teeth. It was a incredibly fortunate team this year that kind of lucked into a highly successful rookie season from an incredible rookie quarterback, right? But how do we elevate that? Okay, let's make our defense better. Let's give it a true awesome player up front. And just imagine what they could do with that defense. You've got Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Myles Garrett, and like Dorrance Armstrong or something. That all of a sudden is like a top 5 D line in football. And we know what Dan Quinn can bring from a schematic perspective. We know what their linebackers brought, like Frankie Louvu. That would just create possibilities. Like, Dan Quinn did have a Micah Parsons, who isn't exactly a 1-for-1 apple for apple with Myles Garrett, but you could have that one dominant force up front, just as he did in Dallas. And then you've got the offense was already great. Like their offense was already like awesome. They're probably going to try to upgrade wide receiver. Their O-line, when healthy, was solid enough. Maybe they could upgrade at running back or something like that. But I think the biggest thing they need to do is bring in pass rush for Dan Quinn, because I think, again, whenever you have a dominant force up front that demands double teams, that can win one-on-one, that can just make a difference-making play, that's going to change your team. And it's going to maybe balance their team out. It's going to take pressure off Jaden Daniels. The best way to take pressure off Jaden Daniels and kind of allow him to have somewhat of a sophomore slump, because that's probably expected just based on how incredible he was as a rookie, is to make his defense better and take the pressure off of him a little bit and allow them to not have to score 30 points to win every time. So Myles Garrett to the Commanders, they have tons of money. They have the capital. They're ready to go, ready to roll, take advantage of Jaden Daniels' rookie contract at number 3. At number 2, the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers are in that Super Bowl window, despite this season of injuries and despite a season of derailment, I guess you could call it, for the 49ers. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, they're going to get back to what they know best, and that's by addressing the pass rush. They brought in Robert Saleh, who's going to be one of the more exciting defensive coordinators to play for any defensive player. And, what would Myles Garrett rather have than a winning culture that's proven they can win year in and year out, pretty much go to NFC championships very consistently, a great coach that's well respected, but then also go to a defensive coordinator that gets you excited to play for his defense and play alongside Nick Bosa on a defensive front. Just imagine what the 49ers could do with Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett, and Fred Warner in their front seven. And it's not like this is too crazy because the Niners do have the 11th pick in the draft, which is a pretty feasible trade option. They also have plenty of cap space. I think they're getting rid of Javon Hargrave, and it's not like they really have to sign a ton of people this offseason. It could be that Dre Greenlaw comes back for manageable, contracts, same as Hufanga, given their injury histories. They might have to let go of one or two players, but a large portion of their offense is already intact. So this Niners team, they realize that some of these guys, these next couple of years are going to be their last opportunities to really make the most of this, like guys like George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey, right? So bringing in a guy that's on a similar trajectory to that has never really won anything, that could help spark this defense, that could help turn it from good to dominant, that is what you do with Myles Garrett, right? I mean, that would be incredible. And given Robert Saleh, his ability to get the most out of a pass rush, that would just be phenomenal stuff. So, yeah, I think the Niners make a ton of sense. They're always going after big ticket defensive linemen. Hargrave is a great example in free agency. They spent a ton of money on him, and they've always been drafting these guys, trying to replenish this defensive line consistently. So at number 2, I have the 49ers. And at number 1, despite the potential cap situation that might exist right now on the surface, there are plenty of moves that this team could make to get their head above water and to be able to make a major difference-making move that puts them in the Super Bowl that has been ever so elusive for Josh Allen. That's the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills are number 1. We've seen even some pictures of Deion Dawkins and some Bills players flirting with Myles Garrett at the Pro Bowl a little bit. And actually, Brandon Beane, the general manager of the Buffalo Bills, did bring up how his number 1 kind of priority this offseason is bringing in a defensive difference maker. And it was basically stemming from a question that was kind of about Chris Jones and Kansas City and how the Chiefs have had that player and how the Bills have not had that player in recent years. And I think, honestly, that's probably outside of, in my opinion, the difference between the Chiefs coaching staff and the Bills coaching staff. The reason why the Bills are not in the Super Bowl is because the Chiefs have those difference makers on defense and the Bills really don't, right? They spent big money on Von Miller at one time, but Von Miller got an Achilles tear and he was already like later 30s, right? So that obviously derailed that decision. With Myles Garrett, he's just going to be turning 30 in December. He's in his prime. He's in his peak, and he would completely change this defense. All of a sudden, Myles Garrett with a front 4 that alongside Greg Rousseau and Ed Oliver, now you're talking about like a top 3 to 5 defensive line in the NFL, because now you make Ed Oliver and Rousseau your 2s and your 3s in terms of pass rushers and guys that you have to pay attention to. While Myles Garrett is a consistent 14 sack type of guy, like every single year, no matter being the most double team player in the NFL, right? Like this season, 83 pressures, led the NFL in tackles for loss. And he's dominant in the running game too, an area where the Bills have been maybe a little bit weaker in their front, and that could definitely help them. I mean, imagine going from just AJ Epinesa to Myles Garrett. Like AJ Epinesa was their starter on the defensive end position this year. Going from that to Myles Garrett is like light years. It's like insane, right? Then you get Matt Milano a little healthier. You still got Bernard. Your secondary is intact. A lot of them are young. You know what you can do on offense with Josh Allen, and all the pieces will be back on the offensive line. Like, the Bills, if they really don't have a lot of things to add this offseason. So I know that their cap space right now isn't the greatest. They could make a couple moves, like shuffle around some cap with Josh Allen and reconstruct some contracts, maybe cut Von Miller or something like that, and get some money and ultimately put together a package for Myles Garrett that could make them leap over Kansas City, which is what their goal is at the end of the day. And it could really make the Buffalo Bills the Super Bowl champs that they've been just absolutely dying to be. So, yeah, those are the 5 landing spots for Myles Garrett. Those are the 5 Super Bowl X Factors. I hope you guys enjoyed, man. Some honorable mentions for Myles Garrett landing spots that I didn't include, but I would think about is the Chargers, the Chicago Bears with all the cap space and the exciting prospects of Ben Johnson, and the New England Patriots, because of their cap space, most in the NFL, the connection to Mike Vrabel being in Cleveland this past year, and the potential of Drake May. So those 3 teams involved with the other 5 teams are landing spots for Myles Garrett. But thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Bleacher Report's NFL Daily. I'm Mitch. Enjoy the Super Bowl, and I'll be back very soon. Peace, guys.